Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Welcome to the optometry session 3 and with permission of chair Dr. Imran and Dr. Rashid, co-chair, uh, should we start? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I know that most of you know, people already know, okay, you must have presentation loaded there and everybody has 5 minutes. तो 1, 2 ये कि मीडियम पर presentation is English. Let's start from the first, and we have the presentation from the Amna Hashmi on the prevalence of myopia among computer users. Danial Yusuf will be presenting on perception of optometrists in Pakistan regarding the integration of artificial intelligence.
Popularity of AI has gained immense popularity these days. Everyone is using AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. So, what is AI? AI is basically the branch of computer science that has ability to do special tasks like that require human intelligence, like speech recognition, voice recognition, and visual perception, etc. Now, we all know that AI is evolving day by day. Application of AI in diagnosing and managing different type of ocular conditions has gained popularity in ophthalmology too, where algorithms not just assist doctor by swiftly analyzing large data sets, but also help them in detection and management of different ocular conditions. Not just the image analysis of different types of diseases. AI application of technology has extended to different range like IOL power calculation, diabetic retinopathy detection, and different stages of diabetic retinopathy detection. And more than not just stop there, they also help in myopia prediction and detection, progression, keratoconus detection and their progression. Like their most advanced Pentagram has this ability to predict the progression of keratoconus. Many big technological companies are working in ophthalmology department, like Google's DeepMind field has the ability to classify 50 different kinds of ocular conditions, mainly the retinal diseases. IBM's AI can predict visual field data from OCT scans. Microsoft's intelligent network for eye care has also ability to work with the NGOs to prevent the avoidable blindness. There are many commercial AI products, tools like Meteos AI, Pegasus V, Luminous also working on IDX DR AI program, where they have their own machine learning program, which can identify different stages of diabetic retinopathy, moderate, proliferative, non-proliferative, and advanced diabetic eye diseases. The main purpose of my study is to assess the current perception of optometrists in Pakistan toward the integration of AI in optometry and to eye care. Their attitude towards benefits and limitations of AI, to examine their change in willingness from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, and their support for including AI into optometry education. My material method for this study include the cross-sectional. This study is the cross-sectional study conducted at the College of Ophthalmology and Allied Vision Sciences New Hospital. The sample sizes was the 313 registered optometrists. So the inclusion criteria mainly include the optometrist and the practicing one. And the exclusion criteria include nationality, legal, ethical, and language, etc. The main results of my study include this frequency distribution, from which we gathered that 79% optometrists believe that AI will enhance the optometry practice. 67% concerned about its diagnostic accuracy, whether it's reliable or not. 76% optometrists believe that it will be part of our institutional curriculum. And the final part was that their interest changed from 45% to 64% after pandemic. These are the few results of my research. As you can see, there are many significant distribution. The conclusion we conduct from this study is that optometrists are willing to largely agree to involve the AI into their practice, and they want to integrate it into their school and residency level. Many are concerned about diagnostic accuracy though, but they show uh, immense support for the AI integration. So the future recommendation should be that AI should be integrated into existing healthcare programs and address the ethical and legal concerns related to AI. Government and healthcare should invest into teleoptometry, making eye more accessible to remote regions. If the financial supports are available, AI such can grant access.
Now all the participants here. So when you start your presentation for 5 minutes, तो इसको देख के कि you are going in a competition, तो ये बड़ा career के लिए अच्छी बात होती है, तो you want something here. And now we have Sahrish Shahid. Sahrish Shahid will be presenting on the axial ocular measurements.
Here to present my research topic, that was the comparison of axial ocular measurements with contact and non-contact biometers. First of all, this research was purely for academic purpose. There was no commercial values or financial interest. Biometry is the most common procedure done in every eye hospital, especially in the case of cataract surgery. And as we all know, that cataract is the leading cause of avoidable blindness. That is approximately 47.8% of the total blindness caused worldwide. To meet improved postoperative refractive outcomes, attention to accurate biometry is very crucial. There are different types to perform biometry, that is the contact method and non-contact method. In contact method, I use ultrasound, and in non-contact method, I use hex triad. Here I have shared some literature. In a study, Iden and Eder, they used A-scan and LensStar to measure the axial ocular measurements, and they had high degree of agreement between them. In another study, Kim H.J. and Joa C.K., they used IL Master, A-scan, and OrbScan to compare the axial ocular measurements pre and post vitrectomy and had no significant difference. The objective of my study was to compare the contact and non-contact biometries in different axial ocular measurements that are mentioned here. So this is the material and method I used in my project. These are the axial ocular measurements I measured with contact and non-contact method. Data was entered and analyzed using SPSS 21. Normality of quantitative data was checked with the Spirovirk test. Independent sample t-test was applied for parametric data. Whitney U-test was applied for non-parametric data. The agreement between these two techniques was done with the Cohen's kappa, and BA plots were used for the graphical presentation. The sample size that were being calculated was 168 non-pathological eyes. That was the 84 subjects. It was a descriptive cross-sectional study. Non-probability convenient sampling was used. Patients with high refractive error like +4 or -4 were excluded. Here are the results. The axial length was significantly longer with non-contact method. The CCT was highly differentiated with the contact method. Anterior chamber depth was significantly deeper with the non-contact method, and the axial length was significantly thicker with the contact ultrasound. Here is the table. You can see all these parameters with the non-contact and ultrasound. That was the A-scan method. And here you can see the p-values. All the p-values are significant. Here is the graphical presentation. In these plots, you can see as the axial lens thickness on the this side and the lens thickness with non-contact method on this side. This is a graphical presentation of my results. So the conclusion was there is a significant difference of axial ocular measurements between contact and non-contact biometers.
से तो measure हो जाती है.
Yes, sir.
We know this.
Yes, sir.
How did you measure it with a contact method?
So I used A-scan, and we measure the CCT where we have the interior surface of the cornea, like the spike with double head, and the surface of the lens, the interior surface. And we use the calipers on A-scan.
Okay, and for lens thickness, what you did?
So lens thickness, we have two different spikes, the interior side and the posterior side. We measured with the caliper, and I do use at 3 different places, then take the mean so that there is the least chance of mistake.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Isha Nasim. I forgot to inform, it is our privilege that we have Dr. Shahnawaz with us. Dr. Shahnawaz is the most senior community ophthalmologist in Pakistan. And he has done a lot of important assignments being in the government setup in Sindh. And he also working in many NGOs and international NGOs. Dr. Shahnawaz, thank you very much for being here. So, Isha Nadeem. Alisha.
I'm a graduate of College of Ophthalmology and Allied Vision Sciences. Today, I'll be presenting my research titled Comparison of Central Corneal Thickness using Ultrasound Pachymeter and Non-Contact Biometer in Emmetropes. I'll start by briefly introducing the cornea and the central importance of cornea and central corneal thickness. As we all know that cornea plays a very crucial role in maintaining the overall integrity of our eye. It also plays an important role as a protective organ, and also plays important role in refraction, accounting nearly 70% of total refraction. Talking about the importance of central corneal thickness, it plays very crucial role in the glaucoma diagnosis as it influences the measurement of intraocular pressure, and it also plays very important role in the refractive surgery planning. Because it helps in determining the safe limits for stromal ablation. So the main objective of my study was to compare the CCT measurements from 2 instruments, which is one is the contact ultrasound pachymeter and the other one is the non-contact pachymeter, which is Lenstar LS900. Primary objective was to assess the accuracy and reliability of each method. The methodology of my, talking about the methodology, this was the comparative cross-sectional study. My population include the undergraduate students in person visiting the Mayo Hospital. Sample size was 92. Inclusion and exclusion criteria. Inclusion criteria was the persons with no history of ocular or systemic pathology, intraocular pressure within normal range, that is below 21 millimeter mercury. Exclusion criteria was all the subjects with ocular and systemic pathology with trauma or any other surgery. I used the SPSS version 25 for the collection of my data. And chi-square and bland Elterman plot was used for significance of my study. This is the result. This table shows the strong correlation between the CCT measurements, which was measured by 2 instruments, ultrasound pachymeter and Lenstar LS900. And this is the plot that shows 95% of agreement, which is the clinically, which shows that the CCT measurement by these 2 instruments was clinically insignificant, and these 2 instruments can be used alternatively for the measurement of CCT. As the various non-contact tools for central corneal thickness measurements yield different findings, but there is a strong correlation between the readings produced by the contact ultrasound pachymeter and Lenstar. In my study, I used these 2 instruments, and the contact one was used after the non-contact to avoid any disagreement. The main difference of values from these 2 instruments, these 2 devices was comparable, and the main conclusion is that these 2 techniques are used interchangeably in different clinical scenarios for measuring CCT. consistent evaluation and follow-up procedures using the same instruments are recommended. In all the settings, these two instruments can be used interchangeably, and it is recommended that on follow-up, the same instrument should be used. This is it. These are the few references that I added in my research. And any questions?
अच्छा, जब भी कोई आए आप लोग, प्लीज़ इंट्रोड्यूस योर नेम एंड व्हाट द प्लेस वेयर यू आर वर्किंग.
Ophthalmology Allied Vision Sciences, batch 22. Now I'm working in Multan in a site saver project in Kadirpur, Rama. So today the topic of my research is comparison of low vision rehabilitation in children and adults. So basically the low vision rehabilitation is a process that focuses on irreversible loss to maximize their remaining visual sight. It focuses on the functional ability rather than the visual acuity. Our objective was to compare the difference of low vision rehabilitation outcomes between children and adults. So basically, we wanted to know the process rate, and we wanted to know the outcomes that we can get from these two groups, between adults and between children. And now we can go to the materials and methods. The study design we used was comparative cross-sectional. Population was residents of Lahore. Our sample size was 32, in which we have 16 children and 16 adults. The data collection method includes visual acuity charts like Snellen and Logmar. Contrast and color vision test was also used to assess this process. The instruments we used was Logmar chart, autorefractometers, Leah numbers, D15 and PV16. We can get the results from descriptive statistics, in which we get the BCVA in these two groups. Our first group were children and our second group were adults. The descriptive statistics was applied to compare the mean score of these visual functions in these groups. The mean score for the distant visual acuity in adults was comparatively higher than in the children. For near visual acuity, the mean score in adults was also higher than in children. So there was a significant difference of mean values for near visual acuity and distant visual acuity in adults. If we can look through the Mann-Whitney test, we perform this test to assess the visual functions like color vision and the contrast sensitivity functions. So if we can go through the mean score of these visual functions in these two groups, the mean score and the mean rank was, there was no significant difference in these two variables. Mann-Whitney test was utilized. The test shows an insignificant difference between these two variables. As we have the p values greater than 0.05, so we accept the null hypothesis and the equal variances are assumed. Although the mean rank for adults is higher than in children, but the difference was insignificant. So we have this conclusion. In this study, we use same methods of rehabilitation for these two groups. Both the groups shows positive outcomes for rehabilitation, but the group of adults shows greater results and the greater recovery. We assume that children has a developmental loss in their developmental process, so the rehabilitation process is a little slower and the outcomes are little lower than in adults. Thank you.
Fizza Batul. Fizza Batul will be presenting. She will be presenting on prevalence of amblyopia and strabismus in anisometropic patients.
I am Fizza Batul, PGR Orthoptics, King Edward Medical University, Lahore. The title of my research is Prevalence of Amblyopia and Strabismus in Anisometropic Patients. Anisometropia is basically an asymmetry between the refractive errors of the both eyes of the same individual. It could be found in any way. One eye is emmetropic or other could be the ametropic, or both eyes could be the ametropic of the different amount. Possible symptoms that can be associated with the anisometropia include eye strain, poor depth perception, headache, nausea, photophobia, tiredness, and dizziness. The objective of this study is to evaluate how frequently amblyopia and strabismus present in patient diagnosed with anisometropia who presented in the eye OPD of Holy Family Hospital, and also to identify the most prevalent condition of the refractive error that is associated with the anisometropia. Material and methods of my research is it was a descriptive cross-sectional study that used non-probability convenience sampling, was done at the ophthalmology department of the Holy Family Hospital, and it takes 9 months, started from the April 2022 to December 2022, and there were 60 patients who enrolled in this study. Data collection procedure. Data of all the patients who have age between 6 to 30 years was obtained on specially designed performers after their informed consent. The clinical examination began with the slit lamp evaluation, followed by visual acuity testing, refraction, and fundus examination after having comprehensive history of the patients. Orthoptic assessment of the patient was performed who presented with the complaint of ocular deviation. The results of my studies is that total 28 patients were male and 32 were female among all the patients, and over 2/3 of the patients were amblyopic. As per statistic, total there were 60 patients and 46 were diagnosed with amblyopia. Strabismus was observed in 9 patients, with 7 were those who have esotropia and 2 were those who had exotropia. And additionally, 10 patients were enrolled who only have asthenopic symptom because of the anisometropia, and that were effectively managed with the corrective interventions. This is the graphical representation of my results. The longest bar depicts the presence of amblyopic patient, and the next very tiny bar depicts those who have strabismus. In the third bar, those patients are represented who have amblyopia and strabismus both together, and in the last bar, 12 patients were those who only have asthenopic symptom because of the anisometropia. This table represents those patients who have amblyopia, and those were 46 and 14 were those who don't have any sort of amblyopia. This graph represents the most prevalent type of refractive error which associate with the anisometropia is myopia rather than hyperopia and astigmatism. So in the end, this study concluded that anisometropia is predominantly linked with the amblyopia, followed by strabismus. It has high prevalence in females than in males, and among all the types, myopic anisometropia is most prevalent than other conditions. These are the references, and that was all from my research. Thank you.
तो ख़ास तौर पर जब आपके पास एक डिफाइंड पॉपुलेशन ना हो और आपने कन्वीनियंट सैम्पलिंग की हो, तो वहाँ पे लफ्ज़ प्रेवलेंस नहीं यूज़ करते, प्रेफरेबली वहाँ पे प्रोपोर्शन यूज़ किया करें, प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ द पेशेंट्स दैट यू हैव एग्जामिन्ड, क्योंकि हम इसको वाइडर एस्पेक्ट में अप्लाई नहीं कर सकते ऑन द पॉपुलेशन. जब हमारे पास पॉपुलेशन बहुत अच्छी हो, हमने अच्छी प्रोबेबिलिटी सैम्पलिंग की हो, उस वक्त हम ये लफ्ज़ प्रेवलेंस यूज़ कर सकते हैं.
Thank you.
Now we have कायनात here. एक चीज़ मैं जस्ट आपको भी बता दूं कि जो जितने भी प्रेजेंटर थे ना, दे आर सपोज टू रीच ऑन टाइम. अपने तकरीर के टाइम पे आना इज़ नॉट राइट थिंग ना. तो जो लोग उस वक्त थे, हमने उस अटेंडेंस के लिहाज से एट द स्टार्ट ऑफ द सेशन यू शुड बी हेयर, और ना सिर्फ खुद हों, आपके साथ 5-7 आपके कोलीग्स भी होने चाहिए, एंड तक होना चाहिए. तो कायनात के बाद फिर दोबारा वी विल स्टार्ट द सीक्वेंस की जो पहले यहाँ पे नाम लिखे हुए हैं.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Myself Kainat Meher. I am here presenting my research project entitled as Evaluation of Color Vision and Contrast Sensitivity in Patients Taking Hydroxychloroquine for Rheumatoid Arthritis. Let's focus on the keywords that are mentioned here. First of all, what is rheumatoid arthritis? Probably we all know that rheumatoid arthritis is a chronic inflammatory autoimmune disorder that basically affects the deformities, extraocular movements, and joints. When we talk about the treatment line, the medical treatment line of rheumatoid arthritis, we consider the DMARDs. It is a group of medicine, and DMARDs are basically known as disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs. These are the anti-malarial drugs, they are the first line treatment for the rheumatoid arthritis. Hydroxychloroquine, that is shortly termed as HCQ, has many advantages as an anti-malarial drug and in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. But we all know that where there is light, there is darkness as well. So it also negatively impacts many organs of the human body. Among which eyes are the most vital ones. It can cause ocular toxicity as well. So my topic of presentation and the question that arose was that how is it affecting the color vision and contrast sensitivity of the patients? So were my aims and objectives. I was supposed to evaluate the color vision and contrast sensitivity in the patients who are taking hydroxychloroquine for the treatment of RA over the period of 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and above as well. And the second and the most important objective was to provide recommendations to the rheumatologists for the early detection and management of visual dysfunction in RA patients undergoing HCQ therapy, so that they can send their patients as the baseline examination before starting this therapy, this HCQ therapy, and to continue a follow-up after 6 months. And I'm stating this according to American Academy of Ophthalmology. Now let's talk about the methodology. The Ethical Review Board of College of Ophthalmology and Allied Vision Sciences, Mayo Hospital, Lahore, approved this study. This was the sampling formula that I used. Non-probability convenience sampling technique was used. And as far as the inclusion criteria is concerned, 20 to 60 years, the patients aging 20 to 60 years old were involved in this study. A self-designed performer was used. I took the informed consent from the patients. This was a retrospective cohort study. The sample size was 45, and they were the adults aging from 18 to 60 years almost. And the tools I used to assess color vision was D15 and contrast sensitivity was Paley-Robson chart. And now the question arises that why I use D15 and not the Ishihara plates. So basically, the color vision defects here that are caused by HCQ therapy are the acquired color vision defects, while the Ishihara plates that we use are used to evaluate the congenital color vision defects. So these were the acquired ones, so I used the D15. And then descriptive data analysis was done by using SPSS version 27. Critical values test was applied, and a p-value of less than 0.05 was used. Let's come to the results. So among 45 participants, 80% were the female, and as far as the results are concerned, due to anomaly, this defect was more prevalent than the other ones, and the most defected participants were aging from 31 to 40, and as far as the results of contrast sensitivity are concerned, so out of total 45 patients and 90 total eyes, 15 right eyes and 17 left eyes were found defected. And color vision abnormalities were quite significant, while the contrast sensitivity defects didn't find significant relation with the time duration of drug intake because probably the sample size was quite low. Here are some tables. As you can see on row number 2, due to anomaly, I found most prevalent this, and rest are the results. Thank you so much.
Any question, please, from the chair, co-chair?
Gee, Kainat, it's a very important topic, and I'm usually interested in. So, and you chose very good parameters for testing for HCQ toxicity. But you know that what are the now current standards for testing the HCQ toxicity in eyes?
Sir, for the very early detection, according to the researches and the studies, we use a visual field, and it was some OCT, I don't remember further. So these were for the early detection, because color vision and contrast sensitivity are those parameters or visual functions that are affected later. After almost, according to my results, I found the results that was, I found the patients that were defected after using HCQ over the period of 2 to 5 years.
You-
So 2 years is also a good tenure. So, yes, sir.
Yes, actually, this question is just for educating all of you. It's not just to take out something from your knowledge. So, remember that HCQ toxicity in eyes is more likely only after 5 years of continuous use,
Okay.
or slash greater than 5 milligram per kg body weight of this drug usage for more than 2 to 3 years. So a high dose or a longer duration.
Sir,
Number
I
one.
probably forgot to mention that the dosage the patients were taking was 200 mg.
200 mg, how many times a day?
Sir, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Chalika, this is not for you. Just
it was,
for you, the important thing to remember is that the current standards for testing HCQ toxicity and even early detection, as you mentioned, it is Humphrey Visual Field
Yes.
10-2. You have to
Yes.
mention this as well because we are testing the macular area only. Because what does this drug causes? Maculopathy.
बिल्कुल. Bull's macular.
पता है सबको?
Yeah.
ठीक है? This drug causes maculopathy, right?
Yes.
And the other thing which we need to do is an SDOCT. And I invite all of you to read about what you are going to find on HVF and SDOCT in HCQ toxicity. Today, this is your chance and you will remember it whole life. I'm not going to tell you, right? ये याद करें कि SDOCT में क्या मिलेगा क्योंकि आप लोग रिपोर्ट करते हो OCT को मेरा ऑप्टोमेट्रिस्ट तो करता है I hope you all do that, right? OCT की findings आज याद करो, HVF 10-2 की findings याद करो. So you should remember what does HCQ does in terms of visual field and OCT in patients. And the third test, which is also a standard nowadays, is a multifocal electroretinogram. Obviously, we do not have this widely available. That's why we don't mention it. But VF and OCT is widely available, right? So these are the current standards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Let me add something that I added almost all the tools regarding the researches and the studies in my thesis as well. So all these details were mentioned there. Thank you so much, sir.
No, better thesis तो मेरे पास नहीं है.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
Thank
ji.
you so much.
And now we have Fozia Kareem. Fozia Kareem. She will be presenting frequency of the ocular emergencies, visiting emergency department.
University Lahore. Today, I am here to represent the topic of my presentation, frequency of ocular emergencies, visiting emergency department at DHQ Hospital, Laya. The contents of my presentation: introduction, literature view, methodology, result, discussions, conclusions, and at the end, references. Introduction. Ophthalmic emergencies are immediate threat led to significant vision loss and blindness if not treated timely. Eye emergencies include scratches, foreign body, burns, chemical exposure, and blunt injuries to the eye or eyelids. According to the Global Burden of Disease studies in 2019, Hassan et al. Approximately 59 million cases incidents. In Pakistan, 39.7% incidents cases of eye injuries nationally. Significance of study. The study will help improve emergency preparedness and preventive strategies, enhance patient outcomes by ensuring that emergency services are better equipped to manage vision threats conditions. Research objectives to determine frequency of ocular emergencies visiting emergency department of DHQ Hospital, Laya. Research hypothesis. In null hypothesis, there is no significant study of ocular emergencies visiting emergency department at DHQ Hospital, Laya. In researcher hypothesis, there is a significant frequency of ocular emergencies visiting emergency department of DHQ Hospital, Laya. Some international review. In 2019, in Nigeria, males are more prominent in female. and in 2018, Ankara. This is the national level in Pakistan, Bag et al. And Hassan et al. Methodology: study design, quantitative, descriptive, cross-sectional or retrospective, or study setting, DHQ Hospital, Laya. Study duration 6 months. Inclusion criteria: both males and females, all types of ocular injuries and all age groups. Results: total 200 cases of emergencies, in which 118, 59% were males and 82, 41% were female. Equal proportion of 1 to 40 years and 41 to 60 years, 18.5, 61 to 80, while 10% are 81 to 100 years. Blunt trauma, foreign bodies, chemical burns, foreign bodies are more in numbers. This is the male versus female graphical representation. According to the age percentage, 1 to 20, 22.5, and so on. According to the diagnosis, percentage of blunt trauma 13.5, 19.5, foreign body 11.5, chemical burns, laceration 14.5, orbital fracture 12.5, 16%, redness and pain, sudden vision loss 12.5. Discussion: the male predominance 59% male versus 41% female align with the global trend of higher ocular emergencies among males, likely due to greater exposure to occupational hazard and risk-prone activities. Similarly, in Saudi Arabia, a study was reported a male predominance as high as 2 to 3-fold in ocular presentation. Al-Abbasi et al. 2017. Conclusion: this study concluded the most common eye injury was foreign body, high proportion of eye injuries in males than females. The burden of ocular infections could be substantially reduced by promoting hand hygiene and safety measures for the occupational hazard to the eye injury. This is the references.
डिस्क्रिप्टिव स्टडी होती है,
Yes,
उसके अंदर नल हाइपोथेसिस नहीं होता,
yes, sir.
क्योंकि उसमें
In my study, which also not included, there is no null hypothesis.
जिक्र ना करें.
Okay. Yes.
जब आप प्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं, ओनली गिव द पॉजिटिव फाइंडिंग्स, और अननेसेसरी डिटेल्स वगैरह जो है ना, उनको अवॉइड करने की कोशिश करें.
थैंक यू वेरी मच. अच्छा जी, क्लैप कर लिया करें, कुछ नहीं होता. नाउ वी हैव आयजा नवाब. आयजा नायाब.
I'm Aiza Nayab, a graduate of College of Ophthalmology and Allied Vision Sciences, Batch 22, and currently I'm working at Hassan Eye Hospital and Laser Center, Sahiwal. The topic of my presentation is the impact of over-the-counter available cosmetic lenses in young people. This was basically a educational type of article. Basically, I will like to explain in start that what are the cosmetic lenses, the main focus of my topic. These were the lenses that are used to basically change the appearance of the eye and can be used to correct the refractive errors also. These were as we go to the history, these were introduced in about 1980s as soft lenses, and these were also approved by Food and Drug Authority as disposable lenses. Importance is is basically among young people who use these for social media and other purposes like just fashion things. This is the majority of people that is using the cosmetic lenses. Statistics and trend surveys indicated that young people, especially those aged between 16 and 25 years of age, and this was my main target of audience to capture. They purchase cosmetic lenses for social event parties or to enhance their just the style. How a lens interacts with the eye directly interacts the cornea. It hinders the oxygen flow and the light that enters the eye, basically alters the light that enters the eye and leads to complications such as dryness, infection, hypoxia, and etc. I have enlisted some contact lens related complications because I was focusing the people who were actually getting some complications due to these lenses. Objective: the study was carried out to know the impact of less expensive
over-the-counter available cosmetic lenses on people of young eye who were using these lenses without any recommendations or consultation from the optometrist or ophthalmologist. The methodology, this was a descriptive cross-sectional study which included 70 young people. The research instrument I used was a self-designed questionnaire regarding the uses of lenses. Study was conducted at the residents of Lahore and the people who visited IOPD and Mayo Hospital, Lahore. I encountered a patient with, due to contact lens complication, he was having some conjunctival congestion and irritation in eye, and that was my motivation to pick that topic. The duration of the study was September to December 2022. These were the results. The complications, I asked them in my questionnaire and the frequency I found. Issue in lenses insertion and removal was in 62.9% people. Irritation and redness that they encountered was in 45.7% people. The 38.6 people encountered the blurring of vision and discomfort, foreign body sensation was found in 32.9% people. Difficulty in focusing 40%. The results. This was quite opposite to my expectations. I was expecting the people will be saying, yes, we are facing the difficulties again and again, and this is very common for them. But majority of the people said we face less complications, less difficulties. But when we feel, it sometimes goes square. No significant relation of gender and the place of buying lenses was found in the ocular complications. This was quite surprising for me, that they were very okay with over-the-counter lenses as well. The prevalence of lens-related discomfort and issue was linked to the number of times a person was using his lenses. They were not changing their pairs. They were reusing the same pair for years also. In few cases, the subjects reported conjunctival congestion and corneal epithelial abrasions, leading them to seek medical assistance. And this thing I have also experienced in my clinical experience also. I have got patients, but the frequency of getting these patients is quite low. The excessive and impaired use of cosmetic lenses made people susceptible to different ocular complications, the main obvious thing. The complications were seen to be significantly related to the usage of lenses, a person's lens usage frequency and duration, lens care habits, consideration of hand hygiene, lens handling techniques. Many of my subjects, they were also exchanging their pair of contact lenses just to have a variety of lenses and to capture their social media videos. These were the recommendations. The proper education and counseling is needed to tell them not to buy lenses from any places, and these are the references. Thank you. Anything to ask?
Good.
Did you have any comparison group?
No,
आपने पेयर्स के ये तो generalized एक
yes.
complications हैं for all contact lenses.
Yes, मेरा
Unless you compare them
yes.
and find the differences.
Yes. मैं जब आर्टिकल ये करी थी तो मैं यही चीज़ एक्सपेक्ट करी थी कि बहुत सारी कॉम्प्लिकेशंस, बहुत ज़्यादा मुझे ऐसे लोग मिलेंगे, लेकिन जब मैंने आर्टिकल ये कंप्लीट किया तो तब मेरा मेन पॉइंट भी ये था कि ये चीज़ें कंपेयर होनी चाहिए, फिर बेटर रिजल्ट इस चीज़ में आ सकता है. सो इस टॉपिक पे मेरे ख्याल में मजीद वर्कअप.
ये लफ्ज़ आपको निकाल देना चाहिए, चीप
over the counter
over the counter या जो भी है.
Okay. Yes, this was generalized.
नहीं है उस वक्त तक ये ठीक नहीं लगता.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Athar Habib.
In optometry by American Academy of Optometry, and recently working as optometrist at Dera Ghazi Khan. Today my topic is a comparative analysis of macular volume and retinal nerve fiber layer thickness in different degree of myopia. बेसिकली myopia जो है ना वर्ल्ड वाइड ये सोचा जा रहा है कि इन कुछ ईयर्स के बाद ये जो है एक पेंडेमिक की सूरत अख्तियार कर जाएगा और 50% जो दुनिया है वो लोग मोस्टली चाइल्ड्स जो हैं 36% myopia से अफेक्ट हो जाएंगे. सो द मेजर
हाँ, कंटिन्यू इन इंग्लिश प्लीज.
Sorry, sir. The major contributing factors include increased near work, reduced outdoor activities, and genetic factors. Based on the spherical equivalent refraction, myopia is classified as mild myopia, moderate, and high myopia. High myopia is known as to cause structural changes in the retina, especially thinning of the RNFL thickness and reduction in macular volume, which increase the risk of glaucoma or myopic maculopathy. The main objective of this study was to evaluate and compare the variations in macular volume and RNFL thickness among different degree of myopia. Methodology. This was a comparative cross-sectional study conducted at the University of Lahore Teaching Hospital. A total 123 eyes of the patients aged 18 to 45 years were included. The participants were divided into 3 equal groups: mild myopia and moderate and high myopia. Each group eyes was 41. RNFL thickness and macular volume were measured using OCT, and data was analyzed using SPSS, and Pearson correlation test was applied. Results. The mean of RNFL thickness in mild myopia was 99.70 plus minus 6.28 macron meters, and in moderate myopia it decreased from to 85 to 85.48 plus minus 2.68 macron meter. In high myopia, it is further reduced significantly to 74.77 plus minus 2.15 macron meter. This reduction was statistically highly significant with a p-value less than 0.01. And macular volume in different degree of myopia. The mean macular volume in mild myopia was 8.47 plus minus 0.82 mm cube, and in moderate myopia it is reduced to 8.03 plus minus 0.29 mm cubic millimeter. In high myopia it is further decreased significantly to 7.51 plus minus 0.21 macron meter cubic millimeter. This difference was also statistically highly significant with p-value less than 0.01. Results. These results show a clear progressive thinning of the retina with the increasing severity of myopia. Both RNFL thickness and macular volume decreases as the degree of myopia increases. Therefore, patients with the high myopia are at much higher risk of developing glaucoma or myopic maculopathy. Clinical significance. This study highlights the importance of the early screening of myopic patients, routine OCT examination in high myopes, or regular follow-up for early detection of glaucomatous damage, and the need for effective myopia control strategies to prevent long-term visual impairment. Conclusion. In conclusion, high myopia is significantly associated with the thinning of the RNFL layer and reduction in macular volume. Early diagnosis and continuous monitoring using OCT can play a vital role in preventing and permanent vision loss in these patients. Thank you. Q2 जर्नल ऑफ ऑप्टोमेट्री एंड विजन साइंस में एक्सेप्ट हो चुका है।
अच्छा, एक चीज़ मैं जस्ट एक बात मेरे ज़हन में आई थी कि डू यू पीपल, जो प्रेजेंटर यहाँ पे है मैं उनकी बात कर रहा हूँ, डू यू पीपल हैव सम लेटर फ्रॉम द एथिकल बोर्ड्स से आपकी अप्रूवल हुई थी स्टडीज़ की? गुड. अच्छा, नाउ वी हैव लास्ट प्रेजेंटर हेयर. थैंक यू अतर. Rabia Gulnaz.
I'm Rabia Gulnaz, graduated from the College of Ophthalmology and Light Vision Sciences. I'm currently working in Al Yaqub Trust Eye Hospital, Chishtiya. So, the topic of my discussion today is efficacy of low vision devices prescribed with and without training. So, first of all, I'll talk about low vision. Low vision basically is an irreversible loss of vision. According to WHO definition, it's an impairment of visual functioning even after any standard treatment or correction, and has visual acuity less than 6/18 to light perception in the better eye, and visual field less than 10 degrees from the point of fixation. And that vision can be used for the execution of tasks. So low vision, low visions are the persons like who has low vision. That's not patient, because all the medical and surgical managements are exhausted. So low vision persons can be managed by the optical and non-optical devices. Optical devices can be a single lens system or a complex lens system like a magnifier or a telescope, And the non-optical devices basically don't have the lens system, but it improves or enhances the resolutions. And it augments the working of optical devices. So the major aim of low vision management is to increase the functionality of the person, make them independent, and help in their education and improve their social activities. So low vision management involves basic steps. So first of all, interview, assessment of residual visual function, assessment of residual function vision, and then intervention, and then visual function rehabilitation therapies. So in my research, I also observed this kind of stuff I'm explaining later. Non-use of low vision devices linked to the 4 categories. It can be related to the individual, like he has depression or anxiety. And the second was device itself. It can be a heavy or the size a big or too small to handle, or the user's environment, social stigma, the main element, and the intervention with the device. He or she don't know how to use the device. So reason for not accepting low vision devices aids after initial trial were visual dissatisfaction. He or she may not able to see anything through that device, or not helping in the daily life, and size of the instrument, restriction of the activities. So back to the topic. Aims was to evaluate the efficacy of low vision devices prescribed with and without training. So the methodology was, it was a quasi-experimental study. Wilcoxon rank test was applied, and the sample size was 38, which were divided into 2 groups. And the inclusion for the persons were above 15 years old. And the sample, which was divided into 2 groups, one for prescribed devices with training, and the other was without training. And after 2 follow-ups, visual functions were assessed. Research was held in Low Vision Clinic, Mayo Hospital. And this was a picture during my research. And the group 2, which was prescribed devices with the training, and after 2 consecutive follow-ups, near visual function and like visual acuity and the speed, reading speed was observed, and there was a clear significant improvement in the near function as compared to the non-trained individuals. So this shows a clear difference. Upper one was the trained and the lower one was without training. But there was an improvement with the prescription of the device, but significant improvement was with the training. So this was a basic that devices prescribed at first visit without any training show improvement, but not that much. So the next one was discussion. On first visit, trial of device was provided and functional vision was assessed. And then at second follow-up, near visual acuity and speed was measured. There was a clear difference in both groups. Report and p-value less than 0.05 show the significance of that discussion. And the recommendation for this, for all the individuals who are doing low vision practice, this is the take-home message. Training of device can play a significant role in the utility and the functionality of the device. So every patient visiting low vision clinic should be trained properly, and counsel, technical support, and training play a significant role. Training of device should be a part of low vision management. So take this message, please. Thank you. Any questions, queries?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now we have, because we have few minutes here, we will distribute the certificates, dummy certificates, and you will get them with your own name from the Shalimar A. So 1, 2 ये कि आखिर में we will have a group photo. So I will request Dr. Shahnawaz, Dr. Rashid, Dr. Imran. Is there anybody who is, oh sorry, बच्चे, आपका नाम? Aisha Zahir. Aisha Zahir.
Everyone, my name is Aisha Zahira and I am a graduate of College of Ophthalmology and Vision Sciences, and currently I am working at Muslim Eye Care. Today I am here to present a topic, measurement of fluctuations in IOP pre and post screen use in young adults. What is IOP? IOP is the fluid pressure within the eye, which is maintained by the fluid production and drainage. We are also aware the increased usage of digital devices in the present era, and the study this study is aimed to see the fluctuations in IOP before and after smartphone usage. Methodology research for this study was conducted after the approval by Ethical Review Board, College of Ophthalmology and Vision Sciences. It was a cross-sectional study. Informed consent was taken from 213 persons, and p-value was calculated using paired sample t-test. Inclusion criteria was young healthy adults with no ocular disease, and exclusion criteria was with any person with ocular disease. IOP was measured using aircraft tonometer for both eyes separately before smartphone usage. Then participants were advised to use smartphone for 30 minutes continuously, and IOP was recorded again for both eyes separately. P-values less than 0.005 was considered significant. Now we come to results. IOP was elevated. Average increase of 2 to 3 millimeter of mercury was noticed among the participants, and rise was found more common among the participants whose use was more than 4 hours, whose screen use was more than 4 hours, and who were at risk of ocular hypertension. This table shows the measurement of IOP before and after smartphone usage. This shows p-values. Conclusion is that the screen usage causes rise in IOP, but this rise was temporary. After 10 to 15 minutes, the IOP came to baseline level. So we recommended our participants to adopt 20-20 rules, to use proper lighting while using digital devices, mobile phones and other digital devices, and proper posture. Thank you. Any question?
मैं क्वेश्चन नहीं करूँगा, लेकिन इट इज़ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक, और आई जस्ट वांटेड टू टेल यू पीपल दैट कि इसके अंदर मज़ीद वी नीड टू सी कि वाकई ऐसा होता है या नहीं. बहुत सारी रिसर्च चाहिए, इसकी हुई भी होगी शायद. ठीक ठीक ठीक, गुड, सही है. नहीं, दिस क्लियर हो गया कि एयर पफ से किया. अच्छा, आप क्या कह रहे थे?
कमेंट करूं इसके ऊपर?
हाँ,
अगर आप इजाज़त दें तो. किसी को समझ आती है ये IOP क्यों इंक्रीज हुआ? किसी के जहन में कोई मैकेनिज्म आता है? एनाटमी तो सारों को पता है ना आई की. क्या हुआ होगा? What could have happened?
Accommodation and convergence.
अकोमोडेशन से IOP पे क्या फ़र्क पड़ेगा? बताओ. अच्छा, उससे क्या हो जाएगा बताओ? बोलो बोलो, ऊंची ऊंची सारी बोलो. AC भी शैलो होने से कुछ नहीं होगा. क्या हो सकता है? और किसी के जहन में बात आती? अच्छा, और किसी के जहन में बात आती? अब मेरे पास भी ना एक हाइपोथेसिस है. आई एम नॉट सेइंग इट विद श्योरिटी, मेरे पास लेकिन एक हाइपोथेसिस है. चूंकि एयर पफ टोनोमीटर से मेजर किया था, ठीक है, तो 30 मिनट इस्तेमाल करने के बाद चूंकि ब्लिंक रेट कम हो जाता है, ड्राई आई हो जाती है, स्क्वीज़ ज़्यादा करेगा. तो जब स्क्वीज़ करेगा तो IOP ने तो बढ़ना है. और नॉन कॉन्टैक्ट टोनोमीट्री के ऊपर, बल्कि एप्लेनेशन टोनोमीट्री पे भी जब पेशेंट स्क्वीज़ कर रहा होता है ना, तो IOP ज़्यादा आता है. समझ आई कि नहीं आई? तो बेसिकली ये ड्राई आई की वजह से उसको जब हवा का वो पफ पड़ेगा उसकी आंख में, ठीक है ना, तो he'll feel that badly and he will squeeze very strongly as compared to when he was not using smartphone. So this might be one explanation, एक hypothesis मेरी तरफ से. तो just food for thought.
Thank you.
We will also need to have a group picture. Before that picture, I will take the names of the speakers and they will come please on the stage. और अलीशा नदीम, आयशा ज़हीर, Aishtar Habib. Atar Habib. Fiza Batul. फिज़ा बतूल वो सुने बात सुने सारे प्रोस्पेक्ट आगे आ जाए। आप एक साइड